When your own child looks you in the eyes and calls you confused, something inside you breaks forever. That was the moment I realized I wasn't losing my mind, I was losing my son. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 72 years old, a retired school teacher and a widow for almost 15 years. I live in a small house on Maple Street, the same house my late husband, George, and I bought 40 years ago. Every flower in the garden, every crack in the wall holds a memory. I raised my only son, Daniel, with everything I had. After George died, Daniel became my world. When he married a woman named Sophie, I truly believed God had given me another daughter. She was polite at first, soft-spoken, and called me Mom. She baked cookies on weekends and told me I was like a blessing in their life. I believed every word. For 3 years, I helped them with everything. Their rent, groceries, car payments, even their furniture. They said they just needed time to get on their feet. I wanted Daniel to have what I never did, so I said yes every single time. But love, when one-sided, turns into something ugly. It started small. Sophie would roll her eyes when I gave advice. Daniel stopped visiting unless he needed something. Then one day, Sophie stopped pretending to like me at all. And then came the wedding. I still remember the morning it happened. I had spent weeks preparing for it. I bought a pale blue dress, pearls to match, and shoes that pinched my toes but made me feel elegant. I even had a small envelope with $1,000 saved up, a wedding gift to help them start their new life. But when I called Daniel that morning to ask what time the ceremony started, Sophie's voice answered. She said with a sweetness so sharp it could cut glass, "Oh, we already got married yesterday, Margaret." It was very private. Only special people were invited. Special people. I froze. My knees went weak. I remember looking around my quiet kitchen, the smell of coffee still in the air, the dress hanging by the door, and feeling something inside me shatter. I had been erased from the most important day of my only child's life. The woman I had helped feed, clothe, and shelter for 3 years had looked me in the eyes and told me I wasn't special enough. I didn't cry right away. I just stood there, phone in my hand, listening to the silence. Daniel didn't even take the phone from her. He didn't say a word. That night, I couldn't eat. I sat in my living room, staring at the sofa I had bought for them, the coffee table I had paid for, the photo of Daniel on my mantle smiling like a little boy, and I asked myself, where did I go wrong? The next week, Sophie called again. Her voice wasn't sweet this time, it was shaky. "Margaret," she said, "the rent is due, and the landlord is being impossible. Could you please make the transfer today? We're under so much stress." For a moment, I almost said yes out of habit. My fingers even hovered over the checkbook. But then I heard her words again in my head. Only special people. I took a deep breath and said calmly, "Sophie, didn't you say I wasn't a special person? I only help special people." Silence. Long, empty silence. Then a quiet gasp on the other end before she hung up. That night, I cried. But they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of awakening. The next morning, I woke up different. I looked in the mirror and saw someone I hadn't seen in decades, the woman I used to be before life made me small. The strong, stubborn Margaret who once stood in front of a classroom and taught 100 kids to spell hope. I brewed my coffee and didn't check my phone. I didn't wait for Daniel's apology. That would never come. Instead, I went to my desk, took out my bank statements, and started counting. 3 years of rent, $500 a month. Groceries and emergencies, another $200 monthly. Birthdays, holidays, gifts, at least $3,000 total. Car loan, $2,000. Medical help, $1,000. Furniture, appliances, random things, maybe $4,000 more. Total, $32,000. $32,000 gone, not for love, not for family, but for manipulation disguised as gratitude. My husband's savings. My retirement cushion. My peace of mind. I laughed bitterly. "So that's the price of being not special," I whispered. The phone rang again. Daniel. Normally, my heart would leap, hoping he'd say, "I'm sorry, Mom." This time, I let it ring. Then it rang again. Sophie. I let it ring too. A message popped up. Mom, please, pick up. We need to talk. I deleted it without opening. For the first time in years, silence felt like power. That afternoon, I walked to the bank not to withdraw money, but to take my life back. Hello, Mrs. Hayes, the teller greeted me. The usual transfer to your son? I smiled politely. Not today, dear. I'm canceling all automatic payments. The manager, Mr. Carter, looked surprised. Are you sure, Mrs. Hayes? You've been so consistent. Yes, I said. Because consistency doesn't mean stupidity. He chuckled softly and nodded. Good for you. While he processed the cancellation, my phone buzzed nonstop. Sophie, Daniel, unknown numbers. It was like they could sense that cash flow dying. I turned the phone off. When I got home, I found Daniel's car in my driveway. Sophie was pacing on the porch, arms crossed, face tense. My stomach tightened, but I stood tall. The moment I opened the door, they both started talking at once. Mom, what's going on? Margaret, the landlord says you didn't send the rent. I raised a hand. Stop. Daniel went quiet. Sophie's lips tightened. I'm done, I said simply. No more money. No more transfers. No more rescues. I'm retired, not your retirement plan. Sophie laughed coldly. You're overreacting. You sound confused. That word, confused. It was like a slap. Daniel tried to soften it. Mom, please. We're worried about you. You've been acting strange lately. You're isolating yourself. Isolating myself? I said. You're the ones who excluded me from your wedding. Sophie sighed dramatically. It was a small event, only family. I am family. No, she said sharply, you're an old woman who doesn't know what she's doing with her money. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with rage. You're right, I said slowly. I finally know exactly what I'm doing. I'm keeping it. Daniel's face went pale. Sophie's eyes darkened. Then in walked a man in a gray suit. Mrs. Hayes, he said, extending a hand. I'm Mr. Lewis, an attorney. Your children asked me to help manage your finances. They're concerned about your mental state. I stared at him. My mental state? Yes. They believe you're no longer capable of handling money responsibly. They like to establish temporary guardianship, just until things stabilize. I laughed, a cold, humorless laugh that filled the room. Guardianship? You mean theft with paperwork. Sophie snapped. You can't talk to us like that. Daniel avoided my eyes. Mom, please. Let's not make this ugly. It's been ugly since you called me confused, I said. Now all of you, out of my house. The lawyer frowned. Mrs. Hayes, this could become a legal matter. Good, I said, walking to the door, opening it wide. Let's make it one. They left, muttering threats and warnings. I watched their car drive away, my hands still trembling, but this time from power, not fear. That night, I sat at my dining table, the quiet around me so deep it felt sacred. For the first time in years, I ate dinner alone and enjoyed every bite. But I knew this wasn't over. Sophie wasn't the kind of woman who accepted defeat. She was the kind who smiled while planning her next move. I looked around my house at the photos, the memories, the peace I had just reclaimed, and whispered to myself, they're going to come back. But this time, I'll be ready. The next morning, I woke up to the sound of knocking, not gentle, polite knocking, but the kind that says trouble has found your door again. For a moment, I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, listening. 3 sharp knocks, a pause, then 3 more. I knew that rhythm. It was Daniel's. He used to knock like that when he forgot his key as a teenager. I got up slowly, my knees aching the way they do when the weather changes. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, and I noticed the house felt colder than usual, or maybe it was just the fear creeping in. When I opened the door, Daniel was standing there, looking like he hadn't slept all night. His tie was loose, his hair messy, his eyes restless. Sophie stood a few feet behind him, arms crossed, face stiff. Behind them was that same gray-suited lawyer from yesterday, Mr. Lewis, holding a brown folder. Good morning, Mom, Daniel said softly. Can we come in? I didn't answer right away. I looked at their faces, all serious and tense, and then at the man in the suit. What for? I asked. Sophie forced a smile. We just want to talk calmly. There's been a misunderstanding. I don't think there's any misunderstanding, I said, still blocking the door. You made it clear what you think of me. Mr. Lewis cleared his throat. Mrs. Hayes, if I may, this is an important matter regarding your safety and financial stability. My safety? I repeated, almost laughing. From what? My own children? Daniel's voice cracked. Mom, please. We don't want to fight. Then stop bringing lawyers to my doorstep, I said. For a long second, no one spoke. Sophie glanced at Daniel, then at the lawyer. Finally, Daniel sighed and said, Fine, we'll leave. But this isn't over. He turned and walked down the porch steps. Sophie followed, muttering something I couldn't hear. The lawyer nodded stiffly, then handed me a piece of paper. Just so you're aware, Mrs. Hayes, he said, your son is within his rights to request an evaluation if he believes you're not managing your affairs properly. I took the paper and looked at it, a formal notice of intent to file for legal guardianship. I smiled faintly and said, Tell Daniel to save his lawyer money. He'll need it for rent. Then I closed the door in his face. That morning I made myself breakfast, eggs and toast, just like always, but nothing tasted right. The coffee was bitter, the silence too loud. I couldn't stop staring at the paper on my table. It was official now. They weren't just ungrateful. They were trying to take my freedom. I spent the rest of the day pacing the house thinking. I needed help, real help. Someone who understood the law, not just emotions. I remembered Mr. Raymond Wells, a lawyer my late husband had worked with years ago. He specialized in elder rights and estate protection. By noon, I was sitting in his office, hand trembling as I explained everything, from the secret wedding to the confusion accusations. Mr. Wells listened quietly, nodding. He was in his 60s, calm, with kind eyes but a sharp mind. Mrs. Hayes, he said when I finished, what your son and daughter-in-law are doing is unfortunately quite common. It's called elder financial coercion. They want to control your assets by questioning your mental capacity. So they can legally steal from me, I said bitterly. Exactly, he nodded. But don't worry, we'll make it very hard for them. The first thing we need to do is document everything. Every transfer, every gift, every message, every threat. I pulled a small notebook from my purse. I already started. Mr. Wells smiled. Good. That will help us tremendously. Then he leaned forward. And I strongly recommend you change your locks, install cameras, and move your main savings to a new bank, somewhere they don't know. I nodded. Already on my list? Excellent, he said. You're not confused, Mrs. Hayes. You're clear-headed. You're just surrounded by greedy people. When I got home that evening, the sun was setting, painting the street in orange and gold. But the beauty of it didn't comfort me. I saw Daniel's car parked 2 houses down. He wasn't even hiding it. I ignored it and went inside. The first thing I did was check my doors and windows. Then I sat at my desk and called the hardware store. Hello, this is Margaret Hayes. I need new locks, high-security ones, and I'd like to have them installed tomorrow morning. The man on the phone hesitated. You sound worried, ma'am. Is everything all right? I'm just taking back control of my life, I said. That night, I didn't sleep much. I kept hearing sounds, a car door closing, footsteps on the sidewalk, a dog barking in the distance. Maybe it was nothing. Maybe it was paranoia. But when you've been betrayed once, every shadow feels dangerous. The next morning, Eddie, the locksmith, arrived. A cheerful young man, maybe in his 20s, with a baseball cap and kind eyes. Morning, ma'am, he said. New locks, right? Yes, and please make sure they're sturdy. I want to feel safe again. No problem, he said, getting to work. While he changed the locks, I made him coffee and told him about what had happened. Not every detail, but enough for him to understand. He shook his head. That's rough. But good on you for standing your ground. My grandma went through something similar. Her kids tried to take over her bank accounts. She fought back and won. His words lifted something heavy from my chest. By noon, the new locks were in place. I paid him generously, thanked him, and watched him drive away. For the first time in weeks, I felt safe. But safety is a fragile illusion. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. The air was crisp, and the park nearby was quiet. I watched children play and old couples feed the ducks. Life looked simple there, peaceful. On my way back, I ran into Evelyn Brooks, my neighbor. She was in her late 60s, silver hair tied neatly, holding a grocery bag. We'd always exchanged polite hellos, but never talked much. "Margaret, I was just about to come see you," she said. "I heard shouting at your house the other day. Everything okay?" I hesitated, then sighed. "Not really, Evelyn. My son and his wife, they're trying to take my money. They think I've lost my mind." Her face softened. "Oh dear. That happened to my sister. Her son nearly got her declared incompetent. You have to be careful. People think it only happens in bad families. It happens everywhere." We stood there on the sidewalk for half an hour, talking like old friends. She gave me the number of her attorney, just in case, and promised to check in on me. When I got home, I felt lighter. Maybe not everything was lost. Maybe I wasn't alone after all. 2 days later, I came home from the grocery store and froze at my doorstep. The front door was open. Every nerve in my body screamed. I slowly stepped inside. The living room looked normal at first, until I saw the dining table. My personal documents, bank statements, and letters were spread out like someone had been reading through them. My stomach dropped. I ran to my bedroom. The drawers were open. My jewelry box was turned over. Nothing was missing, but everything had been touched. Someone had been here. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold, a half-empty coffee cup on the counter. Not mine. I called the police immediately. They arrived within 10 minutes, 2 officers, polite, calm, professional. "Any idea who could have done this, ma'am?" one asked. I nodded slowly. "Yes, my son." They exchanged looks. "Do you have proof?" "Not yet," I said, my voice trembling, "but I will." After they left, I sat down on the couch shaking. My hands wouldn't stop moving. That's when I knew this wasn't just about money anymore. They wanted control, and they wouldn't stop until I broke. The next day, I went back to Mr. Wells's office with the police report. He frowned as he read it. "This is serious," he said. "We'll request a restraining order, and I'll contact the police directly to ensure they take this incident seriously. But we'll also need evidence, real, solid proof." "I'm installing cameras," I said. "Tomorrow morning." "Good," he replied. "And Mrs. Hayes, if they show up again, don't talk to them. Call me immediately." I nodded. I'm done being polite. That night, I couldn't sleep again. Every creak in the house made me flinch. I finally sat in the living room, clutching a blanket, staring at the empty coffee cup I hadn't thrown away, a reminder of the line they had crossed. I whispered to the silence, "You raised a monster, Margaret, but you're not going to be his victim." When the security team arrived the next morning, I watched them install 4 small cameras, 2 outside, 2 inside. They showed me how to check footage from my phone. The technician, a young woman named Clara, smiled at me. "There you go, Mrs. Hayes. You'll feel safer now. Anyone comes near, you'll know." I thanked her and felt relief for the first time in days. That afternoon, I made a pot of soup and tried to relax. I even started a puzzle I'd bought months ago. For a moment, it felt like normal life again. Then, around 6 p.m., my phone buzzed with an alert. Motion detected, front door. My heart skipped. I opened the app. The live camera feed showed Daniel and Sophie standing at my porch. Sophie was pounding on the door, shouting something I couldn't hear. Then she looked straight into the camera and smirked. I froze. It was like she knew I was watching. A few seconds later, Daniel noticed the camera. He said something to her, and they both left, but not before Sophie leaned in close to the lens and mouthed the words, "You'll regret this." The next morning, I printed the footage and brought it straight to Mr. Wells. He added it to the case file. "Perfect," he said. "This proves harassment. We'll send it to the court with a restraining order request." "Will that stop them?" I asked. He sighed. "It should. But people like this rarely stop when they lose control. They might try something worse before it's over." "Then I'll be ready," I said. And I meant it. A week passed. The cameras caught them circling the house twice more, sitting in their car across the street, sometimes late at night. I logged every incident in my notebook with time and date. Then, one Thursday afternoon, there was another knock. This time it wasn't Daniel. It wasn't Sophie. It was a woman in a gray blazer, holding a clipboard. Her smile was polite but cold. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Hayes," she said. "I'm Miss Collins from the County Office of Family and Adult Services. We've received a report that you may be in a vulnerable state and need a welfare check." My stomach dropped. "A report from who?" I asked. She flipped a page on her clipboard. "Your son and daughter-in-law. They're concerned about your well-being. May I come in?" I stared at her, realizing exactly what Sophie had done. If she couldn't steal my money, she'd destroy my reputation instead. "Not without my lawyer present," I said. She frowned. "Mrs. Hayes, this isn't an interrogation. It's just a wellness visit. If you have nothing to hide, that's what people say right before they lie about you," I interrupted. She blinked. "Excuse me?" I said, "Come back when my lawyer is here. Until then, I have nothing to say." She sighed, clearly annoyed. "I'll make a note of your refusal, but we'll be back." "Please do," I said, and closed the door firmly. I immediately called Mr. Wells and explained everything. He sighed. "They're escalating just as I feared." "Don't worry, we'll handle this legally. I'll be at your house tomorrow morning. If that investigator comes back, I'll deal with her directly." That night, I couldn't rest. I sat by the window, staring at the empty street, waiting for headlights that never came. But I knew they'd be back, not to help me, but to take what was left of my peace. By the time dawn broke, I was already dressed, coffee in hand, waiting. At exactly 9 a.m., the same woman from yesterday returned, and this time, she wasn't alone. 2 uniformed officers stood beside her. I opened the door slowly. "Let me guess," I said quietly. "You've come to save the confused old lady." Miss Collins didn't smile. "We have a warrant to enter the premises for a wellness check." Behind her, I saw Daniel's car parked across the street. He was watching. When they stepped into my house with that paper in their hands, I realized this wasn't a wellness check. It was an ambush. The woman, Miss Collins, didn't even wait for me to invite her inside. She brushed past me, nodding to the 2 officers like they were her bodyguards. "Just a quick inspection, Mrs. Hayes," she said firmly, eyes scanning my living room like she expected to find chaos. One officer walked toward the kitchen. The other went down the hallway. I followed them, my voice shaking but clear. "Excuse me, this is my house. You can't just walk around like I'm a criminal." Miss Collins didn't look up from her clipboard. "We've had reports of unsafe conditions, Mrs. Hayes. We're just verifying your well-being." "Unsafe conditions?" I laughed bitterly. I live alone, not in a war zone. But then I saw the folder in her hand. It had my name on it, Margaret Hayes, and beneath it, a thick stack of printed papers. "What's in there?" I asked, pointing. She hesitated. "Just documents from your son and daughter-in-law." "Show me." She didn't want to, I could tell, but one of the officers nodded as if to say, "You might as well." She sighed and opened the folder. Inside were pages of lies, typed, organized, official-looking lies, statements claiming I'd forgotten to pay bills, that I had fits of anger, that I'd given away money to strangers. There were even photos, blurred and grainy, of me talking to my neighbor Evelyn on the porch, labeled possible confused behavior. I felt my face burn. "This is disgusting," I whispered. Miss Collins looked almost sympathetic for a moment. "Sometimes family members exaggerate when they're worried." "Worried?" I said. "They're not worried. They're greedy." Right then, a familiar voice came from the doorway. "Mom, please don't make this harder than it already is." I turned. Daniel was standing on my porch, hands in his pockets, pretending to be calm. Sophie stood beside him, arms crossed, wearing sunglasses even though it was cloudy. The officers exchanged glances. Miss Collins smiled slightly as if she'd expected them. Daniel took a small step forward. "I just want to help, Mom. I told them you've been acting strange. You're pushing everyone away. You're not yourself." I stared at him. "Not myself? You mean not your wallet?" His jaw tightened. "Why are you being like this?" "Because you betrayed me," I said. "You broke into my house. You lied to the government. You tried to steal my life." Sophie sighed dramatically. "You see what I mean? She's angry all the time, paranoid. It's sad, Daniel." The audacity of that woman made my hands tremble. I wanted to shout, to scream, but I remembered what Mr. Wells had told me: never lose your composure. They'll use it against you. So I straightened my back and said quietly, "Get out." Miss Collins frowned. "Mrs. Hayes, we can't leave until—" "Get out," I said again, louder this time. "This visit is over. My lawyer is on his way, and he will not be pleased to see you trespassing." That made her pause. "Your lawyer?" "Yes," I said, grabbing my phone and pretending to dial even though I knew Mr. Wells was still 20 minutes away. "I'm calling him right now." The bluff worked. The two officers immediately looked uncertain. One of them murmured, "Maybe we should wait outside, ma'am." Miss Collins hesitated, then finally said, "Fine, but we'll be following up." They stepped out onto the porch. Sophie shot me a fake sweet smile. "You can't hide behind a lawyer forever, Margaret. You'll thank us later." "I'll thank you when you go bankrupt," I said, and shut the door in her face. When Mr. Wells arrived, I was shaking. I told him everything, every word, every look, every lie. He listened calmly, then nodded. "It's harassment, pure and simple. They're building a case for guardianship, but don't worry, we'll build a stronger one." "How?" I asked. "They're twisting everything I do." He gave a thin smile. "By staying calm, documenting everything, and proving you're more competent than all of them combined." He handed me a folder of his own. "Inside, you'll find a checklist. We'll need a medical evaluation, cognitive tests, bank records, and a witness list. I'll handle the legal filings. You just keep living your life, normally." "Normally," I said softly. "I don't even remember what that feels like." He looked at me kindly. "You'll remember soon enough." For the next week, I followed his instructions. I went to the doctor for a full medical exam. The doctor, Dr. Anderson, smiled as he reviewed my results. "Mrs. Hayes, you're healthier than most people 10 years younger. No signs of confusion or memory issues." He even signed a note confirming it. I nearly cried from relief. Then I went for a psychological evaluation with a specialist Mr. Wells recommended, Dr. Patel, a calm woman with kind eyes. She asked me dozens of questions, gave me memory puzzles, and made me count backward by sevens. I aced them all. At the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Hayes, your mind is sharp. You're perfectly capable of managing your life and finances." "Thank you," I whispered. "You have no idea how much that means." "Oh, I do," she said gently. "I've seen many cases like yours. You're not the problem. The people around you are." The following week was quiet. Too quiet. No calls from Daniel. No visits from Sophie. No strange cars parked near my house. It was as if they were planning their next move in silence. Evelyn, my neighbor, started visiting more often. She'd bring coffee, gossip, and comfort. One afternoon she said, "You know, Margaret, I think you're doing the right thing. People like them. They only learn when life stops handing them free meals." I smiled. "Maybe, but I'm tired of learning everything the hard way." That night, I sat in my living room watching the footage from my security cameras again. Every time I replayed Sophie's smirk, my chest tightened. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about humiliation. They didn't just want what I had. They wanted to prove they could break me, and that's when I made a decision. If they wanted a war, they'd get one, but it would be on my terms. The next morning, I drove to the courthouse myself. I filed an official petition for protection from harassment and unlawful intrusion, attaching all the evidence, police reports, security footage, the fake wellness visit, and the medical evaluations. The clerk, a kind young woman, flipped through the papers and said, "This is a strong case, Miss Hayes. A judge will see it within a few days." As I walked out of the courthouse, I saw something that stopped me cold. Across the street, in a parked car, was Sophie. She was watching me. When our eyes met, she smiled, a thin, venomous smile, and waved. I didn't wave back. I just walked to my car, locked the doors, and drove home with shaking hands. That night, I double-checked every lock, every window, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they were getting desperate. 3 days later, desperation showed its face. It started with a letter. A thick white envelope with my name written in Daniel's handwriting. I almost threw it away, but curiosity won. Inside were 2 pages. The first was short. "Mom, we didn't want things to go this far. You're being manipulated by people who don't care about you. If you don't sign the attached papers, we'll have to take legal action. We love you and only want what's best." The second page was worse, a power of attorney document naming Daniel as the person in charge of all my financial and medical decisions. I felt my stomach twist. They weren't even hiding their plan anymore. I took a red pen, wrote across the page in large, shaking letters, "Over my dead body." Then I scanned it and sent it to Mr. Wells. He called me within minutes. "Good job not signing, Mrs. Hayes. Keep that letter. It's proof of coercion." "What happens now?" I asked. "They'll probably try to file for guardianship officially, but we're ready. You have everything in order, and their harassment record works in your favor." "Will I have to see them?" "Yes," he said softly, "but this time you won't be alone." The court date came faster than I expected. The morning of the hearing, I stood in front of my mirror, wearing the same blue dress I'd bought for Daniel's wedding, the one I never got to wear. I touched the fabric and whispered, "You were supposed to be for love. Today, you'll be for justice." Evelyn drove me to the courthouse. She held my hand the whole way. "Whatever happens," she said, "you're already free. They can't take that away." Inside the courtroom, I saw Daniel and Sophie sitting together, whispering. They looked nervous but defiant. Their lawyer, the same Mr. Lewis, gave me a cold nod. Mr. Wells stood beside me, calm as ever. "Just breathe," he said. "You've already won. We just need the judge to see it." When the hearing began, Daniel's lawyer started talking about my rapid behavioral changes, my declining mental state, and my inability to make rational decisions. It was like listening to a script written by someone who had never met me. Then it was my turn. Mr. Wells handed the judge a folder, medical reports, video evidence, police complaints, everything. He spoke clearly, firmly. "Your Honor, this is not a case of mental decline. This is a case of elder financial abuse. Mrs. Hayes has been systematically harassed, manipulated, and lied about by the very people who claim to love her." The judge looked through the papers for a long time. Then he looked at me. "Mrs. Hayes, would you like to say something?" I stood up slowly. "Yes, Your Honor. I raised my son to be kind, to be honest, to be a man of integrity. I didn't realize until now that love can blind you, that you can give everything to someone and still never be enough. But I am not confused. I'm heartbroken. And I'm done being used." The courtroom was silent. Even Sophie stopped pretending to look sad. After a moment, the judge nodded. "I've seen enough. I'm dismissing the petition for guardianship. Mrs. Hayes, you are clearly of sound mind and fully capable of managing your affairs. Case closed." I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. Mr. Wells smiled for the first time in weeks. Sophie's face twisted with fury. Daniel just sat there, staring at his hands. As we left the courtroom, Sophie hissed, "This isn't over." I turned to her and said softly, "Oh, it is. You just don't know it yet." That night, I thought I'd finally sleep peacefully. But peace doesn't come easily when you've lived through war. At midnight, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Hello? A familiar voice whispered, You think you won, don't you? It was Sophie. My blood ran cold. How did you get this number? You can change locks, hire lawyers, play victim, but you can't hide from the truth. We're family, Margaret. And family always finds a way. Then she hung up. For a long time, I just sat there, staring at the dark window. Outside, a car engine started. Headlights flashed, and then they turned off. I got up quietly, walked to the front door, and looked through the peephole. The street was empty, silent, but deep down, I knew someone was still out there, watching, waiting. I whispered to myself, let them come. I'm not afraid anymore. But my hands were shaking, because part of me knew this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about control and revenge. The next morning, I found a letter slipped under my door. No name, no address. Just 3 words, written in thick red ink, you'll pay soon. For a moment, I couldn't move. The paper trembled in my hands. The words looked wet, like they'd just been written. I looked through the peephole, nothing. The street was quiet, empty, peaceful in that fake way before a storm. My heart beat hard against my ribs. Someone had been here while I slept. I locked the door again, slid the bolt, and sat down at the kitchen table. The letter lay in front of me like a small piece of evil. Could it be Sophie? Or Daniel? Maybe one of their friends? I wanted to believe it was just a prank, but my gut said otherwise. I picked up the phone and called Mr. Wells, my lawyer. He answered on the second ring. Mrs. Hayes, what's wrong? There was a letter under my door, I said, trying to steady my voice. It says I'll pay soon. Do not touch it again, he said quickly. Put it in a plastic bag. I'll call the police myself. Within 20 minutes, 2 officers were at my door again, different ones this time, kinder, calmer. They photographed the letter, dusted it for fingerprints, and asked questions. Do you have any enemies, ma'am? I almost laughed. Just family. They looked at each other. One of them sighed. We'll file this as a harassment threat. It'll add to the restraining order request. Try to stay calm. Stay calm. That was everyone's favorite advice, easy to say when you're not the one sleeping with lights on. That night, I couldn't eat. I couldn't even sit still. I kept checking the windows, the door, the cameras. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. There was silence. Then a whisper, still think you're safe. I hung up immediately, my hand shaking so badly I almost dropped the phone. I turned on every light in the house. The clock read 12:04 a.m. A few seconds later, the cameras pinged, motion detected. I opened the feed and saw a shadow moving near the hedge. Too tall to be the wind. Too slow to be a stray cat. I froze, watching as the figure came closer, closer, then vanished out of frame. I called 911. My voice was shaking. Someone's outside my house. Please send a car. The dispatcher told me to stay on the line until officers arrived. 5 minutes later, flashing red and blue lights filled my living room. But when the police searched the yard, they found nothing, just footprints in the damp soil near the hedge. One of the officers said quietly, Ma'am, whoever this is, they're trying to scare you. It's working, I whispered. The next morning, Evelyn came over with coffee and biscuits. When she saw my face, she gasped. Margaret, what happened? You look like you haven't slept in a week. I showed her the letter, the camera footage, everything. She clenched her jaw. That woman, Sophie, she's behind this. I can feel it. People like her feed on fear. I'm not afraid, I lied. Evelyn smiled sadly. Of course you are, but you're still standing. That's what matters. We sat together for an hour, talking softly. When she left, I felt a little lighter. But the peace didn't last long. At noon, a white envelope arrived in my mailbox, this time with my full name typed neatly, Margaret Hayes. Inside was a single photo, me sitting in my living room the previous night, talking on the phone. It had been taken through my window. I dropped the photo. My hands turned cold. Someone had been watching me inside my own home. I drove straight to the police station with the photo. The sergeant who met me looked genuinely alarmed. "This crosses the line from harassment to stalking," he said. "We'll assign a patrol car to check your street for the next few nights." That helped, but only a little. The idea of strangers in uniform watching my house was both comforting and humiliating. When I left the station, I noticed a black car parked across the street. The windows were tinted, engine off. I took a picture of the license plates, just in case. That evening, I sent everything to Mr. Wells. He called me within minutes. "Mrs. Hayes, this is escalating fast. I'm filing for a full protective order tomorrow. In the meantime, don't stay alone tonight. Can someone be with you?" "My neighbor, Evelyn, maybe." "Good. Call her. Lock every door. I'll come by tomorrow morning with an investigator I trust." For the first time, his calm voice sounded worried. Evelyn didn't hesitate. "Of course I'll stay with you," she said. She brought over a small overnight bag, 2 mugs, and a deck of cards. We played rummy until almost midnight, pretending everything was fine. At one point, she looked around my house and said softly, "It's beautiful, you know. All the little details. It feels like a real home." "Used to," I said. "Now it feels like a cage." She took my hand. "Then tomorrow, we start turning it back into a home again." We both tried to sleep, but sometime after 2 a.m., there was a soft tapping on the living room window. Tape. Top. Top. Evelyn's eyes opened. We both froze. Then louder tap. 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 I reached for my phone, opened the camera feed, and my heart nearly stopped. A face was pressed against the glass. Not Daniel's. Not Sophie's. A man I'd never seen before, his expression blank, almost mechanical. When he saw the small red light of the camera, he stepped back and vanished into the dark. We called the police again. They arrived within minutes, searched the yard, and found a cigarette but still burning near the bushes. The officer bagged it for evidence. "Maybe we'll get DNA," he said. "Do you think they hired someone?" I asked. He didn't answer. By morning, I was exhausted but strangely focused. Fear was turning into anger again, the kind that made me stand taller. Mr. Wells arrived with his investigator, Mr. Harlan, a quiet man with sharp eyes. He examined the window, the footprints, the letters. "This isn't random," he said. "Whoever's doing this knows your routine, and they want to rattle you enough to make mistakes." "What kind of mistakes?" "Signing something, leaving the house unattended, letting them back in." "Not happening," I said. He nodded approvingly. "Good." Mr. Wells handed me another folder. "This is the protective order paperwork. We'll file it today. The judge should sign it by tomorrow." I nodded, gripping the folder like a lifeline. Evelyn made tea for all of us. As she poured, she said, "They won't stop until she fights back publicly." Mr. Wells looked at me. "She's right. Maybe it's time we go on the offensive." "What do you mean?" I asked. "A civil lawsuit for harassment and attempted coercion. You have enough evidence to bury them in court. It would send a message." I thought about it for a long moment. Let's do it. Filing that lawsuit felt like breathing for the first time in months. Every signature on those papers was a small act of defiance. Mr. Wells warned me they'll retaliate, of course. Expect more threats. "I'm done being scared," I said. But inside, I knew fear doesn't vanish. It just hides behind determination. That night, I checked the cameras again before bed. Nothing. The street was quiet. I slept for the first time in days, until 3 a.m. The alarm from the security system shrieked so loud it shook the walls. Evelyn and I bolted out of our rooms. On the screen, the motion sensor flashed garage door open. I grabbed my phone and called 911 while Evelyn grabbed the flashlight. The police arrived within minutes, but by then, the garage was empty. The side door lock had been snapped clean off. "Looks like someone tried to break in," the officer said grimly. "Do you have a car in here?" Yes, I said. My husband's old sedan. He looked around. They didn't take it. Maybe they were looking for something else. I swallowed hard. Like what? He shrugged. Documents. Money. Evidence. Evidence. My case files were in the garage filing cabinet. I ran to check. Every drawer had been opened, but nothing was missing except the one folder, the copy of my lawsuit. The next morning, Mr. Wells was furious. They're desperate. That means we're close to beating them, he said. I'll submit the electronic version, but keep your eyes open. They might try to discredit you again. How? By making you look unstable. They could fake phone calls, send messages under your name, anything to create doubt. It sounded paranoid until that afternoon when my bank called. Mrs. Hayes, the manager said, we received a request to transfer $15,000 from your account to your son's name. We just need confirmation. My chest went tight. I never made that request. That's what I thought, he said. We froze it until we could confirm. Someone used your personal ID number. Sophie. It had to be Sophie. She'd seen my papers months ago. Mr. Wells contacted the bank's fraud department. By evening, they traced the attempt to an IP address registered under Daniel's name. The bank pressed charges. When Mr. Wells told me, he said, they just handed us their own rope. But the small victories didn't erase the tension. For every step forward, there was a shadow behind me. One afternoon while watering my plants, I noticed the black car again, parked farther down the street this time. I walked straight toward it. My heart pounded, but my feet kept moving. When I got close enough, the window rolled down. Sophie was inside. Get away from my house, I said. She smiled faintly. You look tired, Margaret. Maybe you should rest. Everyone's talking about how unstable you've become. Everyone. Oh, yes, she said sweetly. Neighbors, church people, even Daniel's friends. They're all worried. I leaned closer. Tell your friends they'll see me in court. She shrugged. Maybe, or maybe they'll see you in a hospital first. My breath caught. Was that a threat? Her smile widened. It's a warning. Accidents happen to old ladies who forget where they put things. Then she drove off. That night, I couldn't sleep again. I replayed her words again and again. Accidents happen. By dawn, I made another decision. I wasn't going to wait to be a victim. I called Mr. Harlan, the investigator. Can you install one more camera? Inside, in the hallway. Of course. You think they'll try something indoors? I don't think, I said. I know. He came that afternoon and added 2 hidden cameras, one in the hallway, one facing the back door. 2 nights later, at 1 a.m., the back door alarm beeped softly. Someone had entered the code. Only 3 people knew that code, me, Mr. Wells, and Daniel. I didn't move. I just watched the feed from my phone. A figure stepped inside the kitchen, tall, slim, wearing a hoodie. He moved like someone who knew the layout. He walked straight to the hallway. I hit record. He looked around and opened the cabinet where I kept the spare keys and old papers. When he lifted his head, the camera caught his face clearly. Daniel. I felt my heart break and harden at the same time. He stayed for only 2 minutes, then left quietly through the same door. I called Mr. Wells. He told me not to confront him, not yet. This is gold, he said. It proves forced entry and intent. The following morning, Mr. Wells and the police reviewed the footage. An officer looked at me sadly. Ma'am, I've seen a lot, but it never gets easier when it's your own child. I nodded, too numb to cry. That afternoon, Daniel was arrested for breaking and entering and for attempted fraud related to the bank transfer. Sophie posted bail within hours. But instead of hiding, she showed up at my fence that evening screaming. You destroyed my husband's life, she shouted. You ruined our family. I walked to the window and looked at her calmly. You ruined it yourself. She threw something, an egg, maybe a rock. It hit the window and slid down slowly. The police came again and took her away for violating the restraining order. For the first time, I felt safe. Truly safe. Or so I thought. 3 days later, the phone rang again. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something in me wanted closure. When I picked up, a man's voice said quietly, "You think this is over? She still has friends, Mrs. Hayes. You can't watch every door." Click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone until the screen dimmed. Then I looked at the cameras. Every screen showed calm, empty rooms. But when I turned toward the front window, I froze. There on the porch railing was another letter. White envelope. Red ink. My knees almost gave way. I stepped closer, heart hammering. This one had more than 3 words. It said, "We warned you. Now you'll lose something you love." The next morning, I walked outside cautiously. The mailbox flag was up. Inside was a small velvet box. My breath caught. I opened it slowly. Inside was my late husband's wedding ring, the one that had been missing from my jewelry box for months. On the lid was a note, "Found this for you. Thought you'd want it back." I dropped the box, trembling. That ring had never left my house. They'd been here again. Even with Daniel in jail, someone else was helping Sophie. And suddenly I realized the man who pressed his face against my window wasn't random. He was working for her. I turned toward the hallway camera, rewound the footage from last night, and gasped. At 2 a.m., the camera showed a different man entering quietly through the back, moving confidently, unlocking drawers, then leaving. He'd only taken one thing: the ring. I called the police again, voice trembling with fury. "Officer, I have another video. This time, it's not my son. It's someone else." They promised to send a detective that afternoon. When he arrived, he looked at the footage and nodded grimly. "This is organized. She's hiring people. We'll find them." But part of me already knew. Sophie wasn't stopping until she got what she wanted, or until she destroyed herself trying. That night, as I sat alone with the lights dimmed, I made my final plan. If they wanted me to be scared, I'd show them courage instead. If they wanted to silence me, I'd make sure the whole town heard the truth. The next morning, I stood in front of the courthouse steps, cameras flashing, microphones in my face. If Sophie wanted a war, today, the whole world would see who started it. Mr. Wells stood beside me, calm as ever, his expression firm but proud. To one side, a small crowd had gathered. Neighbors, curious townsfolk, even a few reporters. I never imagined I'd be standing there at 72 years old, not as a teacher, not as a mother, but as a woman fighting for her own dignity. "Mrs. Hayes," one reporter called out, "What do you want to say to your son?" I took a deep breath. "I want to tell him that love should never be used as a weapon. That when you turn family into a transaction, you lose both." Another voice shouted, "Are you afraid, Mrs. Hayes?" I smiled softly. "Of course I'm afraid. But courage isn't about not feeling fear. It's about choosing to stand anyway." The cameras kept flashing. Somewhere behind the crowd, I saw Evelyn, my neighbor, standing quietly with a small sign that said, "We stand with Margaret." Tears stung my eyes. Mr. Wells leaned close and whispered, "You just won the public." But this wasn't about winning anymore. It was about reclaiming peace. Inside the courthouse, the air was thick with whispers and tension. Sophie sat at the defense table, her usual arrogance dimmed but not gone. Daniel wasn't there. His bail had been revoked after violating his restraining order. I sat across from her, feeling strangely calm. My hands were still, my heart beat steady. The judge entered and the courtroom rose. When we sat again, Mr. Wells stood. "Your Honor," he began, "we are here not only to finalize the protective order and address the new charges of harassment and burglary, but also to expose a deliberate campaign of manipulation, threats, and intimidation targeted at my client, Mrs. Margaret Hayes." He moved with quiet authority, placing folders, photos, and video evidence on the table. Sophie's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised a hand. "Let him continue." Then, one by one, the screens flickered on. The footage from my home played, Daniel sneaking through the kitchen, the strange man stealing the ring, Sophie screaming at my window, and the letters. Those awful, red-inked letters. The courtroom was silent except for the sound of my own breathing. Sophie's face grew pale. Her eyes darted from the screen to the judge, to her lawyer, and then to me. When the final clip ended, Mr. Wells said quietly, "This isn't a case of confusion, Your Honor. It's a case of cruelty." The judge leaned forward. "Mrs. Hayes, would you like to make a statement?" I stood, my knees a little shaky, but my heart steady. "Yes, Your Honor." I've spent my whole life believing that family is the safest place in the world. I taught my students that kindness is strength, but kindness without boundaries turns into weakness. I never wanted a fight. I just wanted my son to love me. But love built on control isn't love, it's ownership. And today, I refuse to be owned. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Every word carried years of silence, of pain, of strength rediscovered. The judge nodded slowly. "Thank you, Mrs. Hayes. You may sit." He turned to Sophie's lawyer. "Do you wish to respond?" The man hesitated, then sighed. "Your Honor, my client would like to express remorse for her actions." Sophie glared at him, whispering harshly. I said no, but the judge cut her off. "I've heard enough. The evidence is overwhelming. The restraining order is made permanent. The defendant, Mrs. Sophie Hayes, is hereby charged with criminal harassment, conspiracy, and stalking. She will be remanded to custody pending sentencing." The gavel hit the bench with a sharp crack, and just like that, it was over. Outside the courthouse, the crowd had grown larger. Reporters shouted questions I barely heard. All I could feel was the sunlight warming my face. Evelyn hugged me tightly. "It's done, Margaret. You did it." I shook my head. "No, we did it." Mr. Wells joined us, holding a copy of the court order. "It's official," he said. "She's not allowed within 500 feet of you for the rest of her life." I nodded, letting the words sink in. For the rest of her life. I looked up at the sky, blue and endless, and for the first time in months, I took a full, unbroken breath. The next few weeks felt like learning to live again. The police increased patrols around my neighborhood. The camera stayed up, but for the first time, the footage showed only quiet mornings and peaceful nights. Evelyn came by every day with coffee. Sometimes we sat in silence, sometimes we laughed about small things. One morning she said, I think your story's giving people courage. My sister called. She saw it on TV. She said she's filing charges against her son, too." I smiled gently. "Then maybe something good came out of all this after all." She nodded. "You turned pain into power, Margaret." About a month later, I received a letter from the prison where Daniel was held. For a long time, I just stared at it, unsure whether to open it. Finally, I did. "Mom, I don't know where to start. Everything I did, I thought I was protecting Sophie, our life. But she wasn't who I thought she was. She told me lies about you. She said you were losing your mind." When I saw the videos, I realized how blind I'd been. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I'm sorry. Truly sorry. There was a second page the day they arrested her. She blamed me. She said it was my fault we didn't get your money. I guess that's when I finally saw her for what she is. I lost my wife. I lost my home. But maybe someday I can still be your son. Tears blurred the words. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer beside my husband's picture. I whispered to the photo, maybe we didn't lose him completely. Time has a strange way of healing you when you least expect it. The days grew longer, warmer. The roses in my garden bloomed again, the ones George had planted the year Daniel was born. I spent my mornings reading on the porch, sipping tea, and watching the light move through the leaves. Sometimes I'd hear children playing in the street and smile. Life, in all its mess and madness, always finds a way to go on. One afternoon, I heard footsteps on my walkway. I looked up and froze. Daniel. He stood there quietly, hands in his pockets, eyes lowered. He looked older, thinner, tired, but sober. Honest. "Mom," he said softly, "I understand if you don't want to see me." I didn't move for a long time. Then I said, "Come in, Daniel." He stepped inside, hesitating like a child. His eyes darted around the familiar living room. "You changed the curtains?" "Yes," I said. "New start." He nodded slowly. I wanted to thank you for not testifying for more charges. They said you could have. I didn't need revenge, I said. I just needed peace. He swallowed hard. I'm sorry, Mom. I can't change what I did, but I want to do better. I looked at him for a long moment. The boy I raised was still there somewhere, buried under mistakes, but not gone. You have a lot to prove, I said quietly, but maybe this is a start. He nodded, tears in his eyes. I'll earn it. When he left, I sat alone for a while thinking, forgiveness is heavy. It doesn't erase what happened. It just stops it from poisoning what's left. Weeks turned into months. Evelyn and I started volunteering at the community center, helping older people understand how to protect their finances. We called it the Safe Hands Project. Sometimes people would recognize me from the news. You're the teacher who fought back, right? They'd say. I'd smile. No, I'm the mother who finally learned to say no. And every time I said it, I felt a little stronger. One evening, as the sun set, I sat on my porch with a cup of tea. The neighborhood was peaceful. The air smelled of lilacs. I opened my old notebook, the one where I recorded every date, every lie, every proof. The last page was blank. I picked up my pen and wrote, "You can lose everything, your trust, your savings, your name. But if you keep your will, you never truly win." Then I closed the book for the last time. Later that night, I went to my husband's grave. I placed a recovered wedding ring on the headstone, the moonlight glinting off it softly. I kept my promise, George, I whispered. I protected what we built. I protected our peace. A cool breeze brushed against my face, almost like an answer. I smiled through the tears. A few days later, I received one final letter, this time from the district attorney's office. Sophie had been sentenced to 6 years in prison. The judge called her actions a calculated attack on the vulnerable. I folded the letter and set it aside. There was no joy in it, only closure. I walked outside, letting the sunlight warm my face. Evelyn waved from her porch. Life had finally gone quiet again, but this time it wasn't lonely, it was peaceful. Months later, Daniel visited again. This time he brought flowers. Roses, red ones, just like the ones in my garden. I planted some, he said shyly. They reminded me of Dad. I smiled softly. That's a good start. He sat with me for a while, telling stories about his new job, his counseling, the volunteer work he'd started with ex-offenders. I listened quietly, feeling something I hadn't felt in years, hope. Maybe people don't change overnight. Maybe forgiveness doesn't come easy. But love, the kind that survives everything, always finds its way back if you let it. When he left, he hugged me gently. I'll come by next week, okay? I nodded. Bring more roses. He smiled. You got it, Mom. That night, I sat on the porch again. The stars were bright, the crickets sang softly, and somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. I thought about everything, about love, betrayal, courage, and the price of peace. And I realized something. Every storm ends. Every wound closes. And even when life breaks you, it still gives you the chance to rebuild, stronger, wiser, freer. I looked at the ring on my finger, glinting in the moonlight, and whispered, I'm finally home. Sometimes the hardest battles aren't fought in courtrooms or behind locked doors. They're fought inside our own hearts, where love and pain meet. But when you choose to stand up, when you decide you're worth protecting, no one can take that from you again. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. And remember, never let anyone make you doubt your own strength.